A Hairy Problem by Blue Bastard. Chapter 6. Lies. It was a peaceful night, aside from some mysterious howling going on from the Everfree Forest, but for the residents of Canterlot, it was not enough to awaken them from their slumber. However, in the early hours of the morning, long after the howling had stopped, the residents of the mountainside capital were rocked as a huge explosion shook the foundations of Canterlot. Those who immediately rushed out of their homes to investigate the matter were horrified to find that there was smoke billowing from where the southernmost spire of the castle had once stood. Was the city under attack? Were the changelings returning to revenge after the failure of their last invasion? "Everyone, please stand down and return to your homes!" cried out some royal guards ponies, a mix between the day and night guards, who were filtering through the streets with dull due haste. "There is nothing to worry about. The city is not under attack. It's only a trading accident. Every pony in the castle, including the princesses, are safe and sound." Naturally, the majority of the populace were still worried. But if the guards were saying it was just an accident, then what else could they do besides listen to them and return to sleep? Slowly, the streets of Canterlot emptied as ponies entered their beds once more to try to find comfort in pillows and blankets. Meanwhile, at Ground Zero, Princess Celestia and Princess Luna stood on what was left of the platform that had once been Celestia's infernal trap. They were partially covered in dust, which had formerly been ancient masonry work, their coats all singed over, and Celestia's pajamas were a total loss. Gripped in her yellow magic was the box containing the Elements of Harmony, finally separated from the devious crossbow-launching cord that had plagued the sisters only hours ago. "Why did you even set the tower to explode?" "Because I figured that if any pony could get this far into the castle to steal the elements, they would have to have been very powerful, and only an explosion of that magnitude would have stopped them," answered Celestia. "Plus, I never really liked this tower. It was pretty ugly, and even if I hadn't blown it up just now, I would have had it replaced eventually. You did say you wanted an observatory, didn't you, Luna?" "Why do I get the feeling that even though you're accommodating to me, that's just an excuse to give up on your trap and to scare those stuck-up nobles by blowing up part of the castle just for fun?" Celestia nuzzled her sister. "You know me too well, Luna. Now, I need to go clean up so it doesn't look like I'm dying of a plague, then raise the sun. So if you could get the box open, that would be great." "Yes, because who knows what would happen if the stuck-up Canterlot elite let you suddenly turn into a black-spotted pinto alicorn," Luna smirked. "It would be totally worth it just to see their faces." Celestia laughed as he teleported back to her private quarters. Luna did the same, Element's box in tow, before setting it down on the table and getting to work on the 3 locks. It was an unusual set of locks. As a set of keys, they had to be unlocked through the turning of dials to spell out words. She had no clues, but for the size of the words had to be, Luna immediately tried the familiar phrase and got the box open on the first go. "Ha! Silly nonsense indeed, silly!" Luna chuckled as she looked at the gleaming artifacts within the box. The password to open the box had been New Lunar Republic. Somehow, even after running almost non-stop from the farm to the castle in the heart of Everfree Forest, and then back home again before leaping through her open window into the bedroom where it all began, Applejack woke up feeling rather energized. She got out of bed and stood in front of the mirror, although she couldn't remember doing anything other than collapsing on her bed upon her return. Now her body was once again in its original, familiar pony shape. No overgrown mane or fur coat. No paws instead of hooves. Those sharp teeth were gone, and her cutie mark was once again a well-defined trio of apples colored bright red. Any pony who looked at her right now would have said she didn't seem all that different from what a pony mare should like. Hopefully, she thought, it's going to stay like this, because trying to hide paws will be very difficult. "Big Mac? Granny? Something wrong? Where's Apple Bloom?" asked the confused mare, taking her seat.
"Apple Bloom is over at Carousel Boutique with Rarity and Sleep Bale. We say here and there because she doesn't need to be involved in this,"
Granny answered, before tasting to face her middle grandchild with a concerned look.
"Applejack, we need to talk. You've been acting all strange for a few days now. Leia's been not only somehow eating half a meat burger without even realizing it, but he also got missing from your room last night. As your family, we're concerned about what's happened to you, and we need to help you. Well, there's nothing we can do if you don't help us.
Big Mac simply nodded with a yup. While it wasn't a case of words flowing out of his mouth, it was still clear to Applejack he was dead serious about this. Both he and Granny wanted to know the reason for her recent actions. But she couldn't tell him. Not yet. She was still unsure how to break the news to them that she was now a werewolf. But she had to say something.
Oh, well,
she started. The two other ponies leaned in to hear her bear. I'm sorry, but what's going on with me? It's a private matter. Like, real private.
So private, I can't tell you. Not yet. Don't get me wrong. I wish I could. Especially to y'all, since I know the family is willing to help you with just about anything. But this just isn't the time.
Somehow, Granny's age decided to make her mind play connected the wrong dots and make an incorrect assumption when she asked,
What? Are you saying you're pregnant?
Applejack's pupils shrunk to a very small size as he reeled in shock.
What? Lion sakes, no! I'm not carrying a foal inside me. I can assure you of that right now. Like, I don't even have any pony I'm interested in making my special sun pony right now. So what in the cluster makes you think I've been seeing sun pony so intimately behind your back?
Granny shrugged.
Well, I don't know. This seems like something a young man like yourself won't keep secret.
Applejack sighed. Look, I know y'all want to help, but I really just want to keep this private. We're a close family, and I'm always open with just about everything with you, so I honestly appreciate it if I could just deal with this thing myself. Big Mac, always the silent observer, didn't know what to do. He, along with Granny, were almost certain at this point of Applejack's lycanthropy, but Celestia had warned him, and him to Granny by extension, about the potential risk of destabilizing some pony who didn't know that they were a werewolf by informing them as such. And although there was a small amount of evidence, it wasn't nearly enough to force Applejack into confessing about being a werewolf as he was already aware of. With a long-term plan still needing to be developed, Big Mac had no choice but to let his sister deal with this thing by herself. But whatever this problem of hers was, lycanthropy or not, it was still a cause for concern, and he had to make sure the family knew what was going on at this point. Now, you promise that you'll tell us what's going on with you, but only when you're feeling comfortable, so, right?
Of course, I really don't like keeping y'all in the dark, but I'm a grown man, and I feel like this is something I have to deal with alone, replied Applejack.
If there was any bit of her lying, she had gotten significantly better about not showing it, Big Mac noted. Plus, the element of honesty in the Apple family member, truthfulness was pretty much the definition of her essence, so there was no choice but to accept AJ on her word that she would deal with the matter with her own way and talk about it later. Granny, forced to accept the same conclusion, agreed and got up to get started on breakfast. As for Applejack, she was amazed she'd been able to talk her way out of explaining about how unpony-like she had been last night. She had been honest in promising to reveal her secrets later on, but only when she got more comfortable with her condition. Now, the only question was if she could hide it from her friends until that point as well. But that was a problem to worry about later. The current problem was having to fill her breakfast, which thankfully wasn't heavy as usual, and getting ready for a hard day of apple bucking, as the southern field was ready for harvesting. Over in Secret Cube Corner, business was rather light. This was expected, as there was usually a lull in customers after the morning pastry rush. At the moment, Pinkie Pie was busy moving around trays with various amounts of baked sugary goodness on top of them, making way for more to be put in. She was also busy trying to walk around behind the counter while carrying 2 trays of unsold breakfast stock when Pancake came running in, his sister Pumpkin chasing in after him. As if communicating through a strange, shared consciousness, the twins ended up chasing each other right after Pinkie. They liked seeing things fall on her head, especially if it was baked goods related. And right now, they thought she was setting up to dump a lot of that kind of stuff on her head.
Hey, what
exclaimed Pinkie as the twins rested her legs, attempting to make her fall. Unfortunately, Pinkie knew how to respond to this, and so tossed the trays into the air with the food still on them. Then somehow magically appeared right in the spot away from the twins to catch the trays, food unharmed, and slide the trays into the display below in one stiff motion.
Sorry, babies, but Pinkie's got work to do. I'll play with you later.
Nodding in understanding, Despite being babies who barely could even talk, the dangerous duo started their chase anew, but this time into the kitchen, with their father, Carrot Cake, as the target. Pinky could hear him go, "Wow!" in there before his surprise was followed by a sound composed of clattering pans and 3 layers of cake impacting an unfortunate baker's face.
"Honey buns, are you all right?"
Came the worried call from the fallen stallion's wife, Cupcake, rushing from the stairs and into the kitchen to provide assistance. All Pinky did was to only smile and go back to the pastry organization. The twins would be in trouble, but they wouldn't get much flack for their antics. After all, they were just infants who didn't know any better and just wanted some pony to play with. She just combined a tray of strawberry scones and almond cake and put it in the runners when her trademark pinky sense, patent pending, flared up. She began to shake all over, as if getting the shivers despite the temperature being nowhere near cold.
"Uh-oh,"
thought Pinky.
"there's a doozy coming about. Judging by the intensity of my pinky sense, it's going to be a potentially world-shattering."
However, when the shuddering stopped, Pinky just shook her head to clear her mind, then went right back to work, not worried about the potential of something coming that could possibly destroy life as she knew it. It was already past lunchtime when the princesses, opting to go by traditional method of guard-pulled chariots instead of just teleporting, were in view of Ponyville.
"I guess you never learned the fate of that stable loan character, did you, sister?"
Celestia sighed.
"In retrospect, Sable Loam was probably one of my biggest mistakes that I made during those first years on the throne after Mother had passed. I thought he was just an over-promoted upstart who wouldn't dare risk his position in the guard simply to pursue some crazy obsession. So I let him leave in hopes he would just cool off and abandon his concept of ponies turned wolves. He and his followers were long gone when I had learned of their abandonment the next day. They could have been anywhere in the country by then, and since they weren't causing any trouble, I paid them no attention as I was too busy proving to the nobles of my ability to rule over the country just as well as Mother had. But to answer your question, Luna, no. He disappeared after Sombra's fall. I personally examined all the werewolves whose bodies were taken from the battlefields in secret, so I could be sure he was dead. But instead of finding him in that red paw cutie mark of his, all I saw were horribly altered forms that had once been ponies. Corrupted not only by Sombra's magic, but also Sable Loam's insane lupine ideology. Ever since the last known werewolves who had been under Sombra's command were laid to rest in the ground, I had hoped Sable ended up perishing in some way that disposed of his remains so he couldn't be troubling to My Little Ponies anymore. But even if he did die hundreds of years ago, his legacy lives on somehow through some poor, tortured soul who has become a host to his love of wolves, much in the same way you were a host to Nightmare Moon. At the mention of the dark entity that had nearly destroyed Equestria and forced Celestia to become estranged from her for a millennium, Luna couldn't help but involuntarily shudder. She had been young then, and it had all been too easy for that influence to prey upon her, steal her form, and power her for evil intentions. However, where Nightmare Moon could only feed off of jealousy and hatred generated from her hosts, what Celestia had described about werewolves sounded a whole lot worse. Perfectly innocent ponies would contract the curse, which apparently was scientifically named lycanthropy, some centuries ago, and while the victims could continue being their true selves, they played host to an incredibly violent monster who savagely attacked its enemies and, in some reports, even ate infant ponies. In comparison, Nightmare Moon was an antagonistic political rival, as he at least had standards about being violent, and secretly had been quite a fan of vegetarian cuisine. But Applejack was potentially a lycanthrope now, so just thinking about how the kind-hearted and trustworthy farm pony could be turned into a blood predator of innocent ponies, Luna shuddered again. As the chariots drew closer to Ponyville, the dusky princess really had hoped Applejack wasn't actually afflicted by something that horrible. Or if he was, the elements could remove it, and stop another living nightmare's resurrection before it was too late. Apples fell from the sky, only to land in baskets set below. Tree by tree, the landscape was slowly drained of the red and bright green dots as the industrious farm pony carried out her work. Elsewhere, Big Mac was doing the same, while Granny worked on sorting the good apples from the bad and the pile of apples already harvested. Apple Bloom was still absent, having gone crusading with her co-conspirator after school let out, but not without first getting a hug from her big sister to make sure she was all right. The simple, repetitive work that came to symbolize Applejack's purpose in life, as represented by her cutie mark, allowed her to keep her mind clear, free of the troubling thoughts that plagued her recently. The fact she could once again just focus on kicking the crap out of trees until they cried red, round tears made her happy. Sure, life would never be as simple for her anymore, with what her being secretly a werewolf. But if she could keep living her life the same way as she always had, it was nothing more than a mere complication. As she loaded up the barrels into her cart, still full enough to be offloaded at the barn, it occurred to Applejack that she knew very little about her condition. Sure, she got a lot more dog-like in her new alternate form. She had a desire for meat that had taken away some of the appeal apples had once held for her taste buds, and it was incurable, but that was about it. Maybe Twilight's got some books on werewolves, thought Applejack as she hauled the family crop away. Gonna need to be careful enough not to give myself away, but it wouldn't hurt to know a little more about it. I'll probably stop by the library again after we're done here in the fields. She would soon discover her trip to the library would occur much sooner than that. The apples had been unloaded, and the orange mare was about to leave to go abuse more trees, when she recognized a familiar Rainbow moving toward her. Sure enough, it was Rainbow Dash. Howdy, Rainbow! Hey, AJ! I know you're doing farm work and all, but the princesses arrived just 5 minutes ago at Twilight's place, and they want us all to go there. Something about the elements not functioning right, I don't know. The princess? I in the elements? Gosh, this must be serious. How soon do I need to be there? They said as soon as possible, but I put emphasis on soon if you catch my drift. I'll do. I'm gonna tell Granny and Big Mac what's going on first. With her family informed, Applejack took off toward the town, Rainbow taking a detour over at the direction of Fireside's house, no doubt to deliver the same message. I hope this isn't another major problem like Discord or Twilight having gone insane again, thought the apple farmer as he galloped down the road, not noticing that her running style was more like a wolf chasing after prey instead of a running equine. When Applejack arrived at the treehouse, she found Rarity, Twilight, Pinkie, and the princesses already there. Several guards were also hanging around outside, supposedly providing protection, but without an actual threat, they were kind of unnecessary at the moment. What's the problem? Inquired Applejack as he entered the treeberry. It is a matter that we'd rather not discuss until every pony is here, replied Celestia, with a nod from Luna to confirm. They didn't have to wait long, as a few minutes later, the winged third of the elements entered the door.
I heard there was an emergency, so I came as quickly as I could,
spoke Fluttershy in a volume somewhere between a whisper and normal conversation levels. With all the ponies gathered, Celestia gave a nod to Twilight, who, along with Spike, proceeded to cover all the windows and lock the doors before the elder princesses adapt to gather ponies. While it isn't an emergency, it could develop into one. You see, there was recently an attempt to steal the elements from my castle. Luckily, my elaborate and brilliantly designed trap stopped whoever it was, but not before they had somehow opened the box with the elements in it. Although my trap also blew up both the would-be thief and the southern castle to Tartarus, we don't know what his intentions were. Looking away, Luna rolled her eyes and shook her head disbelievingly, since Celestia had no reason to lie about what had happened beyond trying to look not guilty about blowing up her own tower in frustration to being defeated by her own trap multiple times.
So wait, if the elements are still safe, then why did you need to gather us?
Rarity, who up until that point had been absent-mindedly filing her hooves, asked.
While the intruder did not steal the elements, he did manage to break through my defenses and could have potentially done something to them to affect them in some way. So, to review a threat to unleashing yet another evil bane I locked away 1,000 years ago.
Hi, Tyrek!
Although I think Sombra was the last from that time period. Regardless, Luna and I have gathered you here to make sure the elements are still functional. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. Are you sure it isn't a bunch of sirens?
Fluttershy, who had amused something much more worse going on, such as a giant slug with a skull face and a saw-blade hat coming to suck the energy out of the whole planet.
Well, if that's what we're here for, then what are we waiting for?
Asked Twilight, opening the chest and telepathically putting the elements on her friends, while setting the element of magic on her head like a princess's crown. Irony. As if silently commanded by their bearers, the elements began to glow, as they had twice before in their recent uses against Nightmare Moon and Discord. After gradually reaching a brightness level just below the point of the bearers, the princesses having to squint, suddenly rainbows shot out of them, creating a lattice work of color as each element connected to one another. All those present marveled at the beauty, while the guards in half the town wondered what the hell was going on outside, due to golden oaks shining as bright as the sun from their presence.
This lasted for a few minutes before the rainbows faded and the elements returned to their innate states. No words were spoken for a while until Rainbow, ever the impatient one, had to ask, "So, is it accomplished? These things look like they still work to me." The other bears were in agreement, except Applejack, who suspected something was up. "All right, Princess. What's the real reason you're here?" Deciding not to bother making something up to the element of honesty, Celestia decided to cut to the chase. "Okay, I admit. There was anything wrong with the elements, although knowing they still work is always reassuring." Fluttershy started, confused. But didn't you just say some pony tried to? No pony broke into the castle. I purposely blew up the tower to get to the elements, since I couldn't get them any other way due to my own trap," said Celestia, cutting off Fluttershy with an embarrassed grin. "No. What the point of all of this was, we found evidence you might have contracted some evil charm from that wound you suffered a month ago."
"Well, that's what all this is about?"
asked the incredulous Applejack. The princess is right. She'd probably been turned into a werewolf from that attack, but something in Applejack's head made her decide that this wasn't the right time to reveal that. Instead, the farm pony went against her own element and outright made up a story before any pony else in the room could speak up.
"I know I've been doing some, well, rather questionable things as of late, but none of it is because I'm some kind of zombie pony or even a van pony or something like that.
If you all have you have to know." She sighed before dropping the bomb. "It's my time of the month." Every pony else in the room immediately made an expression that showed that they understood exactly what Applejack had meant. Except Spike, since he didn't know what that time of the month meant to those of the fairer sex, but this was probably a private female thing, immediately retreated to the basement. "Spike, allow me to join you." It was Rarity who spoke.
"Oh, I'm sure I could speak for everybody here that while we know what that's like, has it really been that bad that you end up at the meadery of all places, and unconsciously finding yourself having to eat in half a— Oh!"
Word had caught around town that that's what had happened at the meadery, an establishment that Rarity thought absolutely barbaric, and actually wouldn't think about for too long before finally getting ill.
"I know, but you all have to believe me. It's been especially bad this time. Normally, I don't react as badly as this."
It was true. Applejack never really did have strong reactions when that dreaded period came around. But would it be enough to sell the lie her actions were all because of a natural body function, and not because he had been turning into a werewolf? I hope so. Unbeknownst to her, most of her body language would imply a blatant lie beyond the pleading smile was not being subconsciously demonstrated, a side effect of whatever it was making her decide to keep the lycanthropy a secret. So to the rest of the gathered party, she was being fully honest. To break the awkward mood, Luna contacted her for saying,
Well, Celestia and I are sorry for having to force that understandably private bit of information from you."
glaring at Celestia, who quickly nodded with a smile.
"It's all right. Like Rarity said, we've all had to go through this on a regular basis, and it doesn't that y'all care for me so much."
Applejack couldn't finish, as he was promptly tackled by a flash mob hug consisting of her 5 best friends in the world. Luna and Celestia looked upon the pony pile with laughter and smiles, but the telepathic conversation in their heads was much graver. "She doesn't seem like she's lying, but there's still something wrong with her, and I doubt it's just a result of— well, you know," Celestia mentally said to her sister.
"But she's the element of honesty. Why would she lie about something she doesn't have?"
responded Luna.
"Because I think she does. But for one reason or another, she's hiding it. Very well, I might add. But something is going on with that mare even the elements can't cure." "What makes you say that?" "Look at her tail, Luna. Does something seem wrong?" Luna focused on the movements of the farm pony's bundled tail as the pile dissolved back into a group of standing ponies. It looked like a normal pony's tail, just tied up at the end with a red hair tie. Nothing out of the unusual. It was even moving normally, looking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
"I'd like to say, as of Season 4, we have proven that young fillies and colts do that."
"Why is she moving her tail so much?"
Luna questioned. Outside of using it to show more body language, or sometimes an extra appendage, ponies rarely manipulated their tails at any time, especially during conversations, which the group of 6 ponies were now engaged in.
"That's what I want to know. Especially since it's trying to act much shorter like and thicker than it actually is.
almost as if it were a...
In unison, the royal sisters came to the same conclusion in each other's heads.
Wolf's tail!
Looking at each other uncomfortably, they knew they had a situation on their hands. The only thing preventing them from being totally sure Applejack had become a werewolf was that he seemed so honest about putting the blame on something she couldn't have helped. What if she was so sure it was on that, and still didn't know what she had become? Her state of mind was still in question. Risking an out-of-control werewolf was something Celestia wanted to avoid at all costs. But how else would they be able to confirm what they feared was true? As they desperately tried to come up with a new plan, Helicorns could only hope Applejack was in control of herself, that, in the event she was a werewolf, she wouldn't end up spreading it and causing a repeat of the werewolf attacks hundreds of years ago. Applejack, for her part, was just glad she was able to hide her condition from her friends. She didn't want them to leave her if they knew what she was, which is why that secret would be revealed at a later time. A much later time, most likely, but her fellow bearers were her closest friends. Once she felt comfortable as a werewolf, they would be informed. They could be trusted. Hours later, the town had gone to sleep, Applejack included. She fought the urge to go on another night-long running spree in her new form, to reassure her family she was in control of her problems. Derby Hose was still waiting for the mail train to arrive. It had been delayed for several hours due to the engine breaking down somewhere close to the Everfree Forest, 3 miles down the line. Getting it moving again with an old-style pulley team was a slow process. Finally, she heard the pathetic whistle of a crumpled train and the clattering of 16 hooves as 4 strong stallions pulled into the station. Derby noticed that it looked like something had attacked the side of the engine, as the driver rods had been removed and scratch marks on the drive piston casings had gone deep enough that steam was still pouring out, barely leaving any for the whistle. The wall-eyed mailmare had to wonder what kind of creature could do that kind of damage to a speeding locomotive, much less cut through the iron-tempered iron. But with such exact precision that the boiler only lost pressure from escaping steam instead of exploding from the sudden release of pressure.
"Excuse me, miss,"
called a voice, getting Turpey's attention. A brown earth pony with a well-groomed mustache exited the car behind the engine and approached her.
"Are you Derby Hooves, the local mailmare?"
Uh-huh.
"Sorry for keeping you waiting, but I'm sure you see something didn't want this train making it to the station. But the Royal Equestrian Railway doesn't reserve pulling teams simply to waste the budget. Anyways, if you could sign here, please."
Derby signed for the mail delivery, which was nothing more than a few bags of letters she could carry in a cart back to the post office, then sort in the morning. As she was writing, however, there was noticeable movement in the corner of her vision. Most ponies wouldn't have seen it, but Derby's namesake eye condition actually allowed her to see things most ponies would miss.
"Thank you, ma'am. Just insert the boys where you want them to put the sacks."
As the director returned to re-enter the train, Derby tried to where both her mail cart and the sack-laying workers were waiting for her. Once again, she caught movement which she could see in between train cars, and so she shot into the sky to get a better look. However, her higher viewpoint offered no clues to as to the identity of the thing she was looking for.
"Hey, miss, don't mean to be rude, but it's been a long day, and we like not to fall asleep with heavy mail sacks on top of us."
Huh? Oh, sorry. I thought I saw something, but it was nothing.
Derby called back as she landed at her cart. Whatever she saw couldn't be anything important. Maybe a squirrel or a night owl. Hidden behind a building on the other side of the station, a dark figure watched the strange Pegasus without giving away his position. He was mildly curious. Never seen a pony with a face that stupid-looking. But his initial impressions were rejected when she somehow had noticed him darting for the train and almost caught him mid-stride. Some pony called out for her, causing her to abandon the search and go back to whatever it was she was doing. Allowing for a small sigh of relief, the dark figure began darting from building to building, always staying to the shadows and going through as few open areas as possible. It would have been much more safer had he just made the 3-mile journey by himself through the forest, and probably would have gotten here faster too. But even just evolving the train had been a luxury he decided he could afford to rest his legs. There had been plenty of food for him to take, and he had stolen a new satchel to replace his old worn-out one. The food had been all right. No meat, which annoyed him, but was not unexpected. And there had been enough for him to carry extra provisions if he needed them later. But the satchel had been the real prize of the whole endeavor. Few things held any lasting value to him now, but those that did were more valuable than anything. The water canteen, the coin purse, the old photo, the tarred piece of ancient brass, and the locket. The canteen was purely for survival reasons. The coin purse was just for money he would need in periods where he would have to buy what he required. But the rest? Irreplaceable treasures chronicling his life to this point. The path that forced him into what he had become. He had that old satchel for years, but it was going to fall apart before long. So, finding a brand new replacement to restore his priceless trinkets had been a stroke of good fortune. Judging the coast to be clear, he made a beeline for the forest's edge, disappearing in a flash the moment he had crossed the border. Now safe in the forest, many feared for what he considered his greatest trait. He immediately set out to find a nice cave, or something where he could establish a base to which he could return to later, if something went south. Hopefully, it wouldn't be necessary, but as a hunter, he had to always be prepared. After all, the whole reason he retreated so far from these grounds a month ago was to ensure no pony would find him so soon after his attack. It was another hard hour or two of non-stop running before he found a location near the town he approved of, a gigantic cave in the middle of a tall rock formation just a few hours' walk from Winsome Falls. It was close enough to the town that he could get back here easily, but far enough that most would abandon the hunt for him well before getting close. Bunkering down for the night, he allowed himself to drift off to sleep. He would know it and need it, as tomorrow he would begin to reel in his prey in the small town known as Ponyville.